It started with a gym bag. Not mine, his. And I wouldn't have even noticed it if I hadn't been rushing to grab my stuff after my shower, already late for work. But there it was, identical to mine. Black Adidas duffel, same worn-out strap, same keychain looped through the zipper. I grabbed it without thinking. It wasn't until I got to work, peeled off my hoodie, and unzipped the bag to find someone else's clothes, and a pair of boxers I definitely didn't recognize, that I realized I'd screwed up. At first, I panicked. My phone wasn't in the bag. My wallet was missing. But then I found a phone in the side pocket. Same model as mine, but the lock screen wasn't mine. It was a photo of a dog, a golden retriever wearing sunglasses, and, under the photo, 11:14 a.m., Jake's iPhone. Who the hell was Jake? I should have turned around right then, but I had a meeting in 15 minutes and zero time to backtrack across town. So I texted myself from his phone, "Hey, we switched bags. I'm at Commerce and 8th. Hit me up." He replied 2 minutes later, "Bro, you have my underwear." I stared at the message, then I laughed, out loud. "That's the least of your problems," I wrote back. "Your phone has a passcode from 2012. That dog pic, though, iconic." He sent back a selfie. Him standing in the gym locker room, wearing only a towel and looking extremely annoyed. And extremely hot. Dark hair still damp. Sharp jawline. Lean, swimmer's body. Just enough scruff to be dangerous. He looked like the kind of guy who says "dude" a lot and breaks hearts without realizing it. "Can we trade back?" he wrote. "When?" "Lunch, coffee place on 9th and Oak." Deal! I didn't know it yet, but that one accidental switch was about to be the weirdest and best thing that happened to me all year. By the time I walked into the coffee shop, I'd convinced myself this was going to be a quick, awkward exchange and nothing more. Grab my stuff, hand his back, maybe apologize, maybe not. Done. But then I spotted him at a corner table, and suddenly I wasn't so sure. He looked different in daylight. Less locker room towel guy and more effortlessly put together stranger you'd see in a magazine. Dark jeans, plain white tee that clung in all the right places, hair slightly messy but clearly intentional. He was scrolling through his phone like he owned the place. When he looked up and saw me, his mouth quirked into the tiniest smirk. Not a full smile. Just enough to say, "Yeah, I know you're looking. You must be underwear thief," he said as I slid into the seat across from him. I rolled my eyes. "You must be dog guy." That earned me the smirk again. He reached under the table, hoisted up the duffel, and slid it across. I did the same. For a second, our fingers brushed on the strap. Neither of us moved right away. "So," he said, leaning back in his chair. "You're Eli?" I blinked. "How do you know my name?" "You texted yourself from my phone, genius." He tilted his screen toward me. Sure enough, my number was saved as Eli Bag Thief. I groaned. "You're hilarious." "Jake," he said, extending a hand. His grip was firm, warm. "Thanks for not running off with my stuff." "You say that like it didn't cross my mind." That made him laugh, and something about the sound caught me off guard. It was easy, unguarded, the kind of laugh that makes you want to hear it again. We could have ended it there. Handshake, small talk, goodbye. But Jake didn't move. He just sipped his iced coffee and studied me, like he was deciding something. "You busy?" he asked finally. "Now?" "Yeah, lunch. My treat. Least I can do after accusing you of underwear theft." I hesitated. I should have said no. I had work piling up, emails to answer, deadlines looming. But the way he was looking at me, yeah, I said yes. And that one word changed everything. We walked 2 blocks down to a small Mediterranean place. Jake claimed had the best falafel in the city. He said it like he'd been waiting all day to say it. I wasn't sure if I believed him, but I followed anyway. Inside, it was noisy. The kind of place where conversations overlapped and the smell of grilled meat hit you before the door even shut. Jake ordered for both of us without asking what I wanted. Bold move. Normally, I would have hated that, but he said it with such confidence that I let it slide. So he said once we sat, "You work downtown?" Yeah, marketing. Mostly sitting behind a screen trying to convince people they need things they don't. He smirked. "So you're one of those guys." "And you?" I asked. "Construction management. Lots of spreadsheets. Less fun than it sounds. But occasionally I get to yell at subcontractors, so that's a perk." I laughed. He had this dry way of delivering lines that made everything sound like half a joke. The food came, plates piled high with pita and hummus and fries that I'm pretty sure weren't authentic but tasted incredible. Jake tore into his like he hadn't eaten all week. At some point, between bites, he asked, "So you climb?" "Yeah, part-time job at the gym. Pays for groceries. And I like it." "Good," he said, licking hummus off his thumb in a way that made me look away. "Means next time you can show me the ropes. Literally." "Next time?" I echoed. "Yeah, unless you plan on never seeing me again." I opened my mouth to say something clever, but nothing came out. He grinned like he'd won. The truth was, I hadn't expected any of this. A bag mix-up. Sure. A weird coffee trade. Fine. But sitting across from Jake, watching the way he leaned back in his chair, relaxed. Completely at ease. It felt natural. Too natural. When we finished eating, Jake paid before I could even argue. As we stepped outside, sunlight spilling over the sidewalk, he turned to me. "You free Friday night?" It was so direct I almost laughed. "Depends why." "Climbing," he said smoothly. Then, after a beat, "And maybe a drink." After. I should have said no. I should have kept it simple. But the look in his eyes made it hard. So I said yes. And as I walked back to work, bag slung over my shoulder, I realized I was grinning like an idiot. Friday came faster than I expected. I showed up at the gym early, partly because I worked there, partly because I didn't want Jake to see how nervous I was. I told myself it wasn't a big deal, just climbing, just a workout, but my chest felt tight anyway. When he walked in, every excuse I'd rehearsed about why I couldn't make it went straight out the window. He was in a fitted tank top, climbing shoes slung over his shoulder, hair a little messy like he'd run a hand through it one too many times. And that smile, half cocky, half curious, it hit me harder than I wanted to admit. "Coach Eli," he said, tossing me a mock salute. "Ready to teach?" I rolled my eyes but grabbed his harness. "First, let's make sure you don't break your neck." As I helped him strap in, I realized how close we were standing. His skin was warm, faint scent of soap and cologne still clinging to him. My fingers brushed his hip when I tightened the strap, and for a second, neither of us moved. "Comfortable?" I asked, clearing my throat. He smirked. "Depends on your definition." I shoved the carabiner into place harder than necessary, and he laughed. We started on an easy wall, me spotting from below while he climbed. He wasn't bad. Strong, a little reckless, but quick to pick up my directions. At one point he slipped, swinging slightly before catching himself. "Nice save," I called up. "Thanks, coach," he shouted back, grinning down at me. "Bet you like having me at your mercy on this rope." The joke was meant to be light, but the way he said it made my face heat. After about an hour, sweaty and flushed, we collapsed on the padded floor. Jake sprawled back, arms behind his head, chest rising and falling. I tried not to stare, but failed miserably. "You're good at this," he said after a beat, turning his head to look at me. "Climbing?" "Teaching. You've got that patient voice, like you could talk someone off a ledge." "Or onto one," I snorted. That's one way to put it. Silence stretched for a moment, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Just heavy. Charged. Then Jake sat up, close enough that our knees brushed. He looked at me, not smiling now, but serious. "You still up for that drink?" he asked quietly. I swallowed. "Yeah." And I knew then that whatever this was, accident, coincidence, fate, it wasn't stopping at the climbing wall. We ended up at this dim little bar a few blocks from the gym, the kind of place with exposed brick, Edison bulbs, and a menu where every cocktail had some pretentious name, like Urban Forager or Smoke and Memory. Jake didn't even look at the menu. "Whiskey sour," he told the bartender, then turned to me. "You?" "Same," I said, mostly because my brain short-circuited the second he looked at me like that, like we were already on the same wavelength. The drinks came fast, and the first sip burned in the best way. We talked about nothing at first. Work horror stories, dumb clients. His construction crew accidentally pouring cement in the wrong spot. Me accidentally sending a campaign draft to the client that had "do not send," written in all caps. He laughed so hard at that, when people turned to look. The thing was, it didn't feel like catching up with a stranger. It felt like picking up a conversation we'd been having for months, maybe years. At some point, the bar got louder, the tables filled, and Jake leaned in closer so I could hear him. His shoulder brushed mine, then stayed there. My pulse kicked up. "You always this serious?" he asked, smirking into his glass. "I'm not serious," I said. "You're serious right now." "I'm literally laughing." He shook his head. "Nah, you've got this thing. Like, you're holding back." That landed heavier than I expected. I opened my mouth, closed it again, took a sip instead. He watched me, expression unreadable, and then, slowly, deliberately, he put his hand on my knee under the table. Just rested it there. Warm, steady. I froze. Not because I didn't like it, but because I liked it too much. "You okay?" he asked softly. I nodded, throat tight. His fingers tapped lightly against my leg, like he was giving me the option to pull away. I didn't. Instead, I said, "What are you really doing here, Jake?" He leaned in closer, close enough that his breath was warm against my ear. "Honestly," he murmured, "I'm trying not to make the wrong move, because I don't want this to end with just one drink." My stomach flipped, equal parts panic and thrill. I looked at him, really looked, and the smirk was gone. What was left was something I hadn't seen before, something that felt real, and just like that, I knew. One drink was never going to be enough. We left the bar just past midnight. The air outside was cool, carrying that mix of city dust and faint food truck grease. I shoved my hands into my jacket pockets, trying to act normal, while Jake walked beside me like he didn't have a care in the world. "You live far?" he asked. 10 minutes, I said. "Perfect. I'll walk you." It wasn't a question. He just said it like it was obvious. The streets were quieter than usual, shop windows dark, only the occasional car rolling past. We walked shoulder to shoulder, close enough that our arms brushed now and then. Every time it happened, I felt it like a spark. "So," I said finally, breaking the silence, "you always hit on guys who steal your gym bag?" He laughed, low and easy. "First time for everything. Lucky me." "Yeah," he said, glancing at me. "Lucky you." There was something in the way he said it that made my chest tighten. Not cocky, not playful, just honest. When we reached my building, I stopped at the door, fumbling for my keys. Jake leaned against the brick wall like he had all night. "This your place?" he asked. "Yeah." He nodded, like he was weighing something. Then he pushed off the wall, stepped closer. Not too close. Just enough. "I had a good time," he said. "Me too." My voice came out softer than I intended. For a moment, neither of us moved. The city hummed around us, a distant siren, a passing laugh from across the street. But it felt like the air between us was the only thing that mattered. Then Jake tilted his head slightly. Not asking, just giving me space to decide. And before I could overthink it, I closed that space. The kiss was tentative at first, testing, his lips warm, steady, tasting faintly of whiskey and citrus. When he kissed me back, firmer, surer, my heart kicked into overdrive. We pulled apart just enough to breathe. His forehead rested lightly against mine. "So," he whispered, "still think this is about a gym bag?" I laughed, shaky. "Pretty sure I stopped thinking 5 minutes ago." "Good," he said, brushing his thumb across my jaw. "Thinking's overrated." I should have invited him up right then. The words sat on the tip of my tongue. But instead, I froze, caught between wanting and not knowing if I was ready for whatever came next. Jake seemed to sense it. He gave me one more soft kiss, then stepped back. "Another time," he said simply. "Night, Eli." And just like that, he walked off down the street, hands in his pockets, not even glancing back. I stood there long after he was gone, my lips still tingling, wondering if I'd just imagined the whole thing. The next day was torture. I kept checking my phone every 10 minutes like some lovesick teenager. No text from Jake, no call, just radio silence. By the time lunch rolled around, I'd convinced myself he regretted everything. The drink, the kiss, the way he'd touched my knee like he wanted more. I buried myself in work to avoid spiraling. But then, around 3, my phone buzzed. "Jake, climbing again tonight? Or do you need a rest day, coach?" I stared at the screen, grinning like an idiot. Me. "You trying to wear me out?" "Jake, that's the plan." By the time I met him at the gym that evening, the tension was back. Sharper this time, charged. We climbed, but it wasn't about the climbing anymore. Every look, every brush of his hand when he adjusted the rope, every grin when I caught him staring, it all added up, building something neither of us could ignore. Afterward, sweaty and flushed, we collapsed on the padded floor again, like last time. Jake leaned back on his elbows, breathing hard. "You coming with me this time?" he asked, casual. But his eyes locked on mine. "Where?" I asked, even though I already knew. "My place." The words hung in the air between us. Simple. Clear. My heart pounded. I could have said no. I could have laughed it off. But instead, I nodded. And the look Jake gave me then, a mix of relief, hunger, and something softer underneath, told me everything was about to change. Jake's apartment was only a 15-minute walk from the gym, but the whole way there felt like holding my breath. Neither of us said much. Our arms brushed a few times, but he didn't reach for my hand, and I didn't push it. The silence wasn't awkward, though it was loaded, like the air right before a storm. When we finally got inside, his place wasn't what I expected. For some reason, I'd pictured chaos. Piles of laundry, takeout containers, mismatched furniture. Instead, it was clean, simple, almost minimal. A couple plants by the window, shelves with neatly stacked books, a guitar leaning against the couch. "Nice place," I said, kicking off my shoes. "Thanks. It's a work in progress." He tossed his keys in a bowl by the door and gave me a look, like he was gauging what I might do next. I didn't move. My pulse was still hammering from the walk. "You want water?" he asked. "Sure." He went into the kitchen, and I stood there, staring at the way his back muscles shifted under his shirt as he grabbed 2 glasses. My throat was dry, but not from thirst. When he came back, he handed me one, and our fingers brushed. Neither of us pulled away. "Eli," he said quietly. I looked up, and before I could respond, he kissed me. It wasn't like the kiss outside my building, tentative, testing. This one was firmer, hungrier, like he'd been holding back all night, and finally decided he was done with that. His hand cupped my jaw, warm and steady, pulling me in. I kissed him back, hard, and the glass nearly slipped from my hand. He laughed against my mouth, setting his down before taking mine too. "Safer," he murmured, before kissing me again. Somehow he ended up stumbling toward the couch, lips never breaking. I felt the press of his body against mine, his weight, the way his hands slid down my sides like he couldn't decide where to stop. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't want him to stop. We tumbled onto the couch in a mess of limbs, both of us laughing a little, breathless. Jake ended up on top of me, one knee pressed between mine, his face hovering close. You okay? He asked, his voice softer now, more serious. I nodded, though my chest was tight and my pulse was all over the place. Yeah, more than okay. That was all he needed. His mouth was on mine again, hungrier this time, his hands sliding under my shirt, fingertips brushing over skin. I shivered. God, you're warm, he murmured, like he hadn't meant to say it out loud. I pulled his shirt up in response, fingers grazing the ridges of his stomach. He let me, leaning back just long enough to yank it over his head and toss it aside. The sight of him, skin flushed, muscles taut from climbing, made my breath catch. Jake grinned when he noticed. Like what you see. Shut up, I muttered, pulling him down again. The couch creaked under us as we shifted, tangled up in each other. Every touch felt like a spark, his hand gripping my side, my fingers digging into his shoulder, the way our legs tangled. It was clumsy, messy, but real. At one point, he pulled back, eyes locked on mine. You sure? He asked again, more insistent this time. I swallowed, heart hammering, and nodded. Yeah, I'm sure. Something in his expression softened at that, like he'd been waiting to hear it. He kissed me slower then, deeper, his hand threading through my hair, holding me there as if he didn't want me to slip away. And in that moment, lying on his couch, with his weight pressing into me and his breath mingling with mine, I realized this wasn't just lust. I wanted him, all of him, in a way that scared me and thrilled me at the same time. We stayed tangled on the couch for what felt like hours, kissing, touching, laughing in between, pulling back just to stare at each other before diving in again. It wasn't neat, it wasn't perfect, but it felt alive. At some point, Jake pulled me up, so I was straddling his lap, my knees braced on either side of him. His hands rested at my hips, steady, grounding, while mine traced over his shoulders, down his chest. Every movement buzzed with that edge of hunger, but underneath it was something steadier, something I couldn't ignore. When we finally slowed, breathing hard, he rested his forehead against my collarbone. Eli, he said, voice muffled against my skin. This isn't just casual for me. The words hit me harder than I expected. I froze, then gently pushed him back so I could see his face. He looked nervous. Really nervous, like he wasn't sure how I'd respond. What do you mean? I asked. He swallowed. I mean, yeah, I like the kissing, all of it. But if this is just a one-time thing for you, tell me now, because I can't do just a hookup with you. For a second, I couldn't breathe. Because the truth was, I'd been scared he only wanted the physical part, that once the heat wore off, he'd move on. But hearing him say that, it cracked something open in me. I cupped his jaw, brushing my thumb over his cheek. It's not just that. Not for me either. Relief washed over his face, so obvious it made me smile. He pulled me in again, softer this time, a kiss that lingered without urgency. After, we collapsed back onto the couch, his arm draped over me, my head against his chest. The room was quiet, except for our breathing, and the faint hum of the fridge in the kitchen. Jake traced lazy patterns on my arm with his fingertips. Funny, he murmured. All this because of a gym bag. I chuckled, eyes closing. Guess I should start stealing bags more often. He kissed the top of my head. Don't push your luck. And lying there in the dim glow of his apartment, warm against him, I realized this wasn't the end of something. It was the start. The night hadn't given me just a quick relationship. It had given me him.